Ever wondered how many of these little guys get used every single year? Billions. Literally billions. This tiny, unassuming strip of sticky fabric and gauze is so common we barely even think about it. But what if I told you it was born from a husband's desperate attempt to help his incredibly clumsy wife? And that its journey from a kitchen countertop to a global first aid icon is packed with ingenious design tweaks, marketing masterstrokes, and a profound impact on how we handle everyday ouches. Get ready, because we're peeling back the layers on the Band-Aid. Okay, picture this. It's the early 1900s. You get a small cut, a kitchen mishap, a shaving nick, a scrape from playing outside. What do? Well, you probably grab some gauze and a roll of surgical adhesive tape. Sounds simple, right? Wrong! Imagine trying to cut the right size of gauze, then fumbling with a separate roll of sticky tape, all while potentially bleeding and trying not to contaminate everything. It was awkward, time-consuming, and often required two hands or someone else's help. The dressings were bulky, not very sterile once you started handling them, and honestly, a bit of a fad for minor injuries. People often just didn't bother, risking infection for small wounds. There had to be a better way, right? But for a long time, there wasn't. Enter Earl Dixon. In 1920, Earl was a cotton buyer for Johnson & Johnson, living in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Now, Earl was married to Josephine Knight Dixon, and Josephine, well, let's just say she was a tad accident-prone in the kitchen. She was constantly nicking her fingers while preparing meals, burning herself, those little everyday injuries we all get. And Earl, being a doting husband, would dutifully bandage her up using that cumbersome gauze and adhesive tape. He noticed how difficult it was for her to dress her own wounds effectively. She needed something she could apply quickly, by herself. Earl, being a practical guy working for a company that literally made surgical supplies, started thinking. He needed something pre-prepared, something compact. One evening, inspiration struck. What if he could combine the gauze and the tape into a single ready-to-use strip? He took a long piece of surgical adhesive tape, the kind Johnson & Johnson produced, laid it sticky side up on the kitchen table. Then, he placed small squares of sterile gauze at regular intervals down the center of the tape. But here's the clever bit. To keep the adhesive from sticking to itself before use and to protect the gauze, he covered the whole thing with a strip of crinoline fabric. This crinoline had a starched, non-stick surface. Now, Josephine could simply cut off a piece of this pre-made bandage strip, peel off the crinoline backing, and apply it to her cut in one go. Genius. Josephine loved it. Suddenly, her minor kitchen injuries were much less of a drama. Earl had solved a very personal problem, but he soon realized this little invention might have much wider appeal. Earl decided to pitch his idea to his bosses at Johnson & Johnson. Now, J&J was already a big name in surgical dressings and sterile products. You'd think they'd jump at it, right? Well, not exactly. Initially, the reception was a bit lukewarm. The executives listened politely, but they weren't immediately convinced. Was there really a market for pre-made small bandages? Would people pay for the convenience? Remember, these first Band-Aids, and yes, the name Band-Aid was coined pretty early on by a colleague, William Johnson Kenyon, were handmade. Earl literally made them for his wife. The first commercial Band-Aids, launched in 1921, were also largely handmade. They were quite chunky by today's standards, 2.5 inches wide and a whopping 18 inches long. You were still supposed to cut them to size. Sales were slow. Very slow. In the first year, they only made about $3,000. That's not exactly setting the world on fire. The company was even considering discontinuing the product. It seemed like Earl's brilliant idea might just fade away. But Earl and a few supporters within J&J believed in it. They realized a couple of things. First, people needed to see how convenient these newfangled bandages were. Second, The product itself needed some refinement for mass appeal. One of the first big improvements came in 1924. Machines were introduced to produce pre-cut, individually wrapped Band-Aids. This was a game changer. No more cutting strips from a big roll. Each Band-Aid was now a perfect single-use size, more hygienic and much easier to carry around. This made them far more practical for the average consumer. But they still needed a marketing push. The big break for Band-Aid came from an unexpected source: the unsolved mysteries of the oceans. Johnson & Johnson decided to distribute free Band-Aids to Boy Scout troops across the country. Think about it: young, active boys constantly getting scrapes and cuts during their outdoor adventures. It was the perfect target audience. The Scouts loved them. They were easy to use, lightweight to carry in their first aid kits, and effective. They told their parents, who then started buying them. This grassroots marketing was incredibly effective. Sales began to climb. Then in 1938, another crucial innovation: sterilized Band-Aids. While J&J prided itself on sterile components, the act of hand assembling or even early machine assembling could introduce contaminants. Now the entire packaged Band-Aid was guaranteed sterile. This was a huge selling point, aligning perfectly with J&J's reputation for medical safety. But the event that truly cemented the Band-Aid as an indispensable item was World War II. Millions of Band-Aids were included in the first aid kits issued to American soldiers. These soldiers experienced firsthand the convenience and effectiveness of these little adhesive bandages in battlefield conditions, for minor wounds, of course. When they returned home, they brought this familiarity and trust in the product with them. Suddenly, Band-Aid wasn't just a convenience, it was a proven, essential part of modern first aid. Demand skyrocketed. The little strip born in Earl Dixon's kitchen was now a household name. Earl Dixon, by the way, was eventually made a vice president at Johnson & Johnson, a pretty good outcome for being a caring husband. With Band-Aid firmly established, Johnson & Johnson didn't just sit back. They continued to innovate, refining the design to meet even more needs. This is where the unseen design principles really shine: constant iteration based on user feedback and new material science. In 1951, they introduced the first Band-Aids with decorative designs. And who was the first character to grace a Band-Aid? Mickey Mouse, of course. This was a stroke of marketing genius. Suddenly, getting a small cut wasn't so scary for kids. It was an excuse to get a cool Band-Aid. Other characters quickly followed, turning a utilitarian medical product into a desirable item for children. But the design evolution wasn't just about looks. Functionality was always key. Remember those early crinoline backings? They were eventually replaced with more modern, easier-to-peel materials. The adhesive got better, stickier when you needed it, but easier on the skin when removed. In 1956, shear strips were introduced. These were made with a clear, almost invisible plastic tape, making them much more discreet. This was a big deal for adults who didn't necessarily want to advertise their minor injuries. Then came perforations in the plastic tape. Why? Breathability. Allowing air to reach the wound helps it heal faster and reduces moisture buildup, which can lead to skin irritation. A small detail, but a significant improvement. The materials themselves evolved. We got fabric Band-Aids, which are more flexible and conform better to moving body parts like knuckles and knees. Waterproof Band-Aids arrived, perfect for swimmers or just washing your hand without ruining your bandage. They even developed specialized shapes: knuckle bandages, fingertip bandages, designed to stay put on those awkward, hard-to-bandage spots. And let's not forget advancements like medicated Band-Aids containing antiseptic or liquid Band-Aids that create a waterproof seal over a wound. The core concept Earl Dixon dreamed up, gauze plus adhesive, remained, but it was constantly being enhanced, adapted, and improved upon. Each little tweak made the Band-Aid just a bit better, a bit more useful. The success of Band-Aid was so total that something fascinating happened. The brand name Band-Aid became a generic trademark in many countries, especially the US. Just like people say Kleenex for any facial tissue or Xerox for a photocopy, many people say Band-Aid for any small adhesive bandage, regardless of who actually made it. This is the ultimate testament to a brand's dominance in the market. It means your product isn't just a product, it's the product that defines the entire category. Legally, Johnson & Johnson still actively protects its trademark, but in common parlance, Band-Aid just sorta means sticky plaster. Beyond its commercial success, the Band-Aid has a cultural significance. It's a symbol of minor hurts, of healing, of care. Parents put them on children's boo-boos not just to protect the wound, but also as a comforting gesture. A kiss, a kind word, and a Band-Aid. It's a childhood ritual for many. But for a long time, there was a glaring oversight in this ubiquitous product, one that highlighted a broader societal issue. Most Band-Aids were a single flesh tone, a peachy beige color that clearly wasn't representative of everyone's skin. For people of color, wearing a standard Band-Aid often meant drawing more attention to a minor injury rather than concealing it. It was a small but constant reminder of a lack of representation in everyday products. Thankfully, this has begun to change significantly. In recent years, Johnson & Johnson, along with other brands, has launched Band-Aids in a diverse range of skin tones. Brands like True Color Bandages were pioneers in this space, specifically creating bandages for diverse skin tones. The introduction of these by major players like Band-Aid brand in 2020 was a hugely welcome step. It might seem like a small thing, a differently colored strip of plastic, but it's incredibly meaningful for inclusivity and representation. It says, "We see you. This product is for you too." It's a powerful example of how even the most ordinary objects can reflect and respond to important cultural shifts. So, how many Band-Aids are we talking about? Johnson & Johnson has reportedly produced well over 100 billion Band-Aids since their invention. That's enough to circle the earth many, many times. It's staggering to think about the sheer scale of this one simple idea. Every day, millions of people around the world reach for a Band-Aid to cover a cut, protect a blister, or soothe a scrape. The basic design, a sterile pad on an adhesive strip, has endured for a century. Why? Because it's a near-perfect solution to a universal problem. It's simple, effective, cheap to produce, and incredibly easy to use. Think about the design principles at play. User centricity, designed from the outset to solve a real user's problem. Josephine's cuts. Simplicity, no complicated instructions or assembly needed. Portability, small, light, easy to carry. Hygiene, individually wrapped and sterilized. Accessibility, affordable and widely available. The Band-Aid didn't just make wound care easier, it democratized it. It empowered individuals to take care of their own minor injuries quickly and safely, reducing the risk of infection and the need for more complex medical attention for small issues. And the innovation hasn't stopped. We now have hydrocolloid Band-Aids for blisters that promote faster healing, antimicrobial bandages, and even research into smart bandages that can monitor wound healing or deliver medicine. But even with these high-tech advancements on the horizon, the humble, classic Band-Aid will likely remain a staple in our first aid kits and medicine cabinets for a long time to come. So the next time you peel open one of these little adhesive wonders, take a moment to appreciate the journey it's been on. From Earl Dixon's loving concern for his wife's kitchen calamities to a global symbol of healing and care, constantly evolving yet remaining true to its simple, brilliant core. The Band-Aid is a fantastic example of how a small idea, born from empathy and a desire to solve a simple problem, can stick around, change the world in its own little way, and become truly unseen in its everyday ubiquity. It's amazing how much history and innovation can be packed into something so small, isn't it? The Band-Aid is more than just sticky tape. It's a story of love, ingenuity, and a century of boo-boo protection. Now, I'm curious, what's the most unusual or memorable time a Band-Aid has come to your rescue? Or perhaps you remember a favorite character Band-Aid from your childhood that made getting a scrape just a little bit better? Let us know down in the comments below. We'd love to hear your stories. And if there's another everyday object whose hidden history you're dying to uncover, suggest it. We might just peel back its layers in a future episode of Unseen. Until next time, keep looking closer at the world around you. You never know what unseen stories you'll find. And maybe, just maybe, keep a Band-Aid handy. You never know when inspiration or a minor injury will strike.